Thank you all for coming. I'm excited to share information with you about real estate, which is honestly one of my favorite topics. Um, oh wait, where'd my presentation go? One of my favorite topics. I love talking about it, helping other people get familiar, teaching it, doing it, just all of it. This is recorded just so you
Whoa.
um
Hey, sleepyhead.
oh, just a couple reminders, please mute your microphone unless you're asking a question. Eliminate any distractions. It's time to talk about making money. Very important. And then if you ask me any questions through the chat, let's say you forget, then I will make sure to answer those after each segment. So there's actual slides on here that have question marks where you can ask questions. All right, so this is our agenda. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then we're going to talk about you. I will lay out all 5 mistakes for you. I'm not going to hide the ball. Then we're going to go through them one by one, and I'll have time for questions in between. And then we're going to talk about the live accelerator. All right, about me. My name's Ashlee. I do a lot of things. Honestly, I wouldn't, if I were you, even try to make sense of any of it. Just accept it. It just is what it is. Here's some fun facts. My favorite job ever was as a grocery bagger, actually, at Albertsons. And I know it sounds basic, but it was actually quite peaceful and stress-free. They didn't pay well, but it was a pretty good job. My previous job before I became an attorney was being a special ed teacher. My current job is boss babe, but actually an attorney. And my dream job is a food critic, but also a book reader and a world traveler. If I could do all that in one job, that would be like my dream. So in terms of real estate, it's very fun for me, not just on the investment side, but also on the construction side. And I consider real estate as like my ticket to freedom. During the pandemic, actually, is when I realized that I know it sounds basic, but like jobs are not secure because I saw people getting laid off left and right. And I was just like, whoa. I guess not that it didn't occur to me, but when I saw so many people unemployed for so long, it just put me in a little bit of a panic. And I was like, this can't be the case. I need something, some kind of way where I can provide for myself, provide for my family, and not be fully reliant on somebody else to give me a paycheck. But also, because we were all inside, like I was on social media heavily, I was reading books, and I realized like people are out here living rich lives. And I'm just like, why am I not living that life? I don't understand. Like the exposure really messed me up too, because it just made me realize like there's literally no reason why so and so can live this lifestyle and I can't. Like they're not smarter than me, they're not more worthy than me. Like why is it that they can do it and I can't? So that's another reason why I'm so passionate about real estate. About you. So I imagine that if you signed up for this type of workshop, you're probably here because you're maybe overwhelmed by the idea of investing out of state. Maybe you don't know where to get the money. Maybe you're concerned about managing a property from afar. Maybe you already have a property. I don't know. Maybe you're concerned about the legal or regulatory hurdles. That's rarely the case. Maybe you're just not confident in actually doing it. Or maybe you're worried about the unexpected costs or the risk, whatever it is. Hopefully, you get some value out of this and some information to help you take the next step. Everything's going to be all right if you follow the steps and do the right thing. That's my caveat. Okay, so here's the 5 most expensive mistakes in my experience. I'm not going to hide the ball. The first one I would say is choosing the wrong property type, and we'll talk more about that. The second one is only relying on what you see online. It's very easy to just go on Zillow and be like, oh, this is what I can afford, or this is what the market looks like. But honestly, there's so much that goes on not online, and that can be where you find a lot of good deals. 3, being way too optimistic about the numbers, not shopping around is number 4. And then being lackluster with your due diligence. Some people are just, when it comes to the due diligence part, they are so excited about the money that they don't investigate enough. All right, so this first one, choosing the wrong property type. Honestly, I think this is the number 1 mistake because Once you choose a property type and you buy that property and it wasn't right for your purposes, now you're stuck with this property. You can always sell it, but sometimes that feels like a hassle when you're already in the thick of it. So when you're choosing a property, you want to make sure that it aligns with your investment goals and it aligns with the local market demand. So when I started investing, my goal was cash flow. So when I'm looking for properties, I want to look for properties that can net me a certain amount every month. I'm not trying to find a market where the best type of investment is a fix and flip because that's not the property for me. It's not going to give me monthly cash flow on a consistent basis. So when I understand what my purpose is and what my goals are, it honestly just does the process of elimination for me. It eliminates certain markets, it eliminates certain strategies, and it's just okay, I've narrowed it down and this is exactly what I'm looking for. If you don't choose the right property type for your goals, it can cause difficulty when you're trying to rent out the property or get your desired returns. Let's say you want cash flow, but you buy a property in an area where the best strategy is to fix and flip because the rents are low and there's more buyers and homeowners than there are renters. Now you have to figure out, okay, am I going to be able to get enough rent to cover the mortgage that I have on this property and the expenses associated with it? Probably not. If the best strategy for that market is fix and flip, you're probably not going to get what you want in terms of rent and positive cash flow. That's why it's important to know these things ahead of time. And I know this is like the fluffy stuff, understanding why you're doing this, what you hope to get out of it. But once you have that direction, it's very clear what to do next. The second thing is only relying on online listings. So there's Zillow, there's Redfin, there's Realtor.com, there's the MLS. Any real estate agent you sign up with is going to put you on their MLS listing list, and you're going to get daily updates with different properties that match your criteria. And that's great, but there's a lot of stuff that happens not on the MLS, not on Realtor.com, not on Zillow. I one time was approached by a real estate agent because she knew what I was looking for, and she told me about a property that she was about to list and said, hey, look, you can go ahead and take a look before I even put it on the market. Maybe you can negotiate something with the seller. He's motivated. And it never made the MLS. Like it just came to me. So it was never listed for sale. And that's what I mean by not everything is online. Sometimes things are relationship based. I had another realtor in a different state now when she knows what I'm looking for. So when she knows that something is coming on the market, or she just heard from word of mouth that someone's looking to sell something, she'll let me know. She'll go look at it, send me pictures and everything before it even hits the market. And so I get to be the first pick. Those are the kinds of relationships you want to build. And that being online and looking at the apps and stuff, that's not going to help you do that. You have to build a relationship with a real estate agent and other people on the team. Even contractors can bring deals to you. I had a contractor bring something to me that he saw on Facebook Market. He had already gone and looked at the property, talked to the owner and everything. Building those relationships will really help you and bring more deals your way. You can also get really steep discounts on properties that aren't listed on those popular platforms. So you can go to HUD, like the Housing Authority website. They have discounted properties. A lot of times you have to pay cash. You can also go on foreclosure websites. You can go to tax deed sales. These are properties that are not necessarily listed on Zillow and Realtor, but you can get really good discounts. And I'm not saying they're all quality or anything like that, but it can give you, like, let's say you want to do a BRRRR, which is buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. So you want to do a BRRRR, you want to get in really cheap. You want to get a cheap property, you want low renovation costs, and you want a good amount of rent and a high appraisal value so that when you refinance, you can get your cash out. So let's say you want to do a BRRRR. A lot of times there's land banks that can give you really cheap properties and they're great for BRRRRs. So I know Detroit has a land bank. We flew out there last year and they were talking about this annual auction where you can get properties for $500, which is insane. Now, Detroit has its own issues and stuff, but if that's the market you want to be in, then you might as well go ahead and get the land bank property. I mean, they have stipulations like you have to fix it up in 6 months and things like that, but a lot of people do it. Even in Ohio, I was looking at a land bank property. It was like a duplex and it was less than $3,000. And I was just like, this is insane. The only reason I didn't get it is because their land bank requires that you either be a resident of the county, or if you're not a resident, that you have owned property in that county for more than a year. So what did I do? I bought a property so that I can own something for more than a year. So now I can qualify for the land bank properties. So the point is, you can get a lot of good deals if you're not just looking at those popular online sites. And when you build a relationship with representatives in the market that you trust, then they will bring deals to you. Any questions so far? Nope. Oh, looks like
I
you
have
do.
one.
Okay, go ahead.
So I know you were saying to find a trusted local representative, but let's say you've never bought a home. How would you go about finding a trusted representative to let them know what you're looking for and keep you in mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. So what I did, and it's a lot of work, but I went on these sites that I just talked about and I looked up the list of realtors. For instance, on realtor.com, you can actually narrow realtors by if they're sellers agents, if there's buyers agents, you can see how many deals they've closed in whatever time frame. So I went on Realtor for North Carolina because I didn't know anybody in North Carolina. And I made a list of like 10 realtors. Then I went on ChatGPT. This is real life, okay? I went on ChatGPT and said, look, I am looking for a realtor in North Carolina. I don't know anybody, but I want to figure out who might be the best realtor for me. Please draft an email that I can send to these realtors, introducing them to me, telling them that I will be investing in the area, and asking them create 5 questions to ask them that will help me determine if I want to move forward with maybe a phone call or something like that. Create a template basically. So then I took my template, I pasted it into Gmail, and I took that list of realtors and I literally just sent them individual emails and filled in their information with the template and sent it all out. And I was like, all right, let's see who responds. So then I crossed people off the, so if they didn't respond within a week, to me, that's how I knew, no, I don't want to work with you. Because when it comes to investing in real estate, sometimes things can move really fast and you need someone who's going to be responsive. Some people responded in 5 minutes. I was like, yo, this is insane. Like some people were like, let's get on a call. I was like, whoo, okay. This is a lot. I mean, moving fast, but the people that took too long to respond, I crossed them off my list and then I narrowed down to the ones that responded. Then I talked to them on the phone. And that's where it'll come down to your own individual preferences. So when I'm on the phone with a realtor that I've never worked with, I go off of vibes. So I'm like, all right, how do I feel about this person? Do I feel like they're nice? Do they sound kind? Are they respectful? Are they taking me seriously? Sometimes I'll have people that, once we get on the phone and I don't know if it's because they hear that I'm a woman or maybe because I sound young. I don't know what it is, but I can tell from their voice that they're not taking me seriously. And those, of course, are people that I cross off my list. And that's basically how I go through it. And then from that list, I narrow down to one or two. And then I start communicating with those people about what I want, seeing how they continue to be over the next couple weeks. And then honestly, they just weed themselves out. The people that you're not meant to work with, they fall off eventually. Either they show who they really are, or they just stop responding, or they don't respond as fast as another person. And so once you have that person, then you start to cultivate the relationship, ask them questions, tell them about yourself, get a little vulnerable, let them tell you stuff. Now, I have had situations where this did not go this way. So I've had situations where I created a list and they all were trash. And so I had to start over. I've also had situations where I started working with someone on recommendation from someone else, and I was giving her a chance. We were working together for 8 months until I realized that she was trash and had to let her go as well. So sometimes it's not so cut and dry, and you do have to spend some time like figuring out if this is going to work. But um, I think once you do your first transaction with them, you will have a good idea of if you want to move forward. So I had a realtor actually in out of state, and I did one transaction with her, and I was just like, I don't think I want to move forward with that. And I will tell you the details. You never know who's watching. So we can talk about it offline. But did that answer your question?
Yes. And then if
Okay.
anyone doesn't have another question, I have another question.
It looks like Lizette has a question, but so I'll let her ask hers and then I'll come back to you.
I was just wondering if now that the real estate rules have changed in terms of the down payments and stuff, like where the money is coming from, is there anything else that you now look for or anything that you've realized when dealing with realtors?
That's a good question. I have not had it affect me yet. Honestly, I don't really think it will affect me. I think that if I, as a buyer, am having to pay commission, I will just have to factor that into my numbers. And we're going to talk about the numbers. But I also think that there's a negotiation piece to that. So the seller is motivated because they need to sell their home, right? I think it depends on where you are in their timeline. So, for instance, if this house that I'm in now, if I was buying this and that law had already passed, I don't think I would have had any problem getting the seller to pay my buyer's commission because they were desperate. Their house had been on the market for 180 days. They had been lowering it by $10,000 every other month. So I think if I came to the table and said, "Hey, I need you to pay the buyer's agent," I think they would have been like, "Okay, like we'll pay the buyer's agent," because they were desperate. And so I think you can either account for it in your numbers on the front end, or you can just think about what position and what leverage you have to negotiate that they pay for that. And I think if you have a good real estate agent, they're going to help you with all of that anyway. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And then Simone, I think you had another question.
Yeah, so I know for the first mistake, you said choosing the wrong property type and
Yeah.
to know your why. So, for instance, if you're looking for cash flow, you said to research the local market to determine
Go ahead.
the most in demand property types. What research do you specifically look at to figure out? Basically, if you're looking for cash flow, what would you look for in order to figure out what properties you need to be aiming for, if that makes sense?
Yeah, it sounds like you're saying, okay, if my goal is cash flow, how do I know that this is a good market for that?
Yes.
So I look at first, now this is where these online tools do come in handy. So first, I will go on something like Zillow and I would use their rent finder to look at what the rents are in the market that I'm looking at. And this might require you to look at various areas, but let's say I want to look in Los Angeles. I'll go on Zillow, I'll type in the zip code or I'll type in the city name, Inglewood or something like that. And then I'll narrow on Zillow to rent. So I'll use the filters and click rent. I think you can do it by time. And then I'll put in like the type, the size. So like maybe 3 bed, 2 bath or something like that. Or maybe I'll just do 2 bed, 1 bath apartment and I'll
Okay.
see what those rental amounts are. And I'm like, oh crap. In Inglewood, you can get a 2 bed, 1 bath for between 2,100 and 3,000. That's insane. Let me see how much they cost. So then I will toggle my settings to go to properties sold on Zillow for the same criteria. So 2 bed, 1 bath, I don't know, maybe condo or something like that. Whatever I'm trying to buy. And then I'll say, oh, wow, a 2 bed, 1 bath condo could sell for 400,000 in Inglewood. Then I'll go to my not rent, my mortgage calculator and I'll put in the number. So let's say it's 400,000. I'll put in the property purchase amount, how much I have to put down. I'll estimate for taxes and fees and everything. And I'll look at what the mortgage is, what the estimated mortgage is. Let's say the mortgage is 2,700. Then I'm like, ooh, given today's interest rates. And I'm like, ooh, okay, 2,700, that's not really gonna work with the amount of rent that I can get in Inglewood for that size property. So I don't want to buy in Inglewood if I'm going to be doing a long-term rental, or at least I don't want that size. Or I can say, maybe I can rent out by the room in Inglewood instead of renting out the whole thing. So then I go and I look up how much are individual rooms renting for in Inglewood. And so let's say I see that for a 1 bedroom with a shared bathroom, people are paying $1,300. I'm like, huh, okay, if I have a 2 bedroom, I could probably get 2,600, but dang, my mortgage will still be 2,700 or whatever number we said. So it doesn't really cover it. And so that's how I know this is not going to work. So then I moved to another market and I'm like, all right, let me look at something else. I don't know, Miami or Cleveland or whatever. So that's how I do it. But I only get that far once I've already heard something about the market. So that's listening to podcasts, reading real estate news, just keeping your ears open for that kind of information. You might hear, let's say you listen to different podcasts and you hear so many people talking about investing in Georgia. Then you're like, wait, what's going on in Georgia? And so then I would go investigate, like, what is going on in Georgia? Is this somewhere that I should look at for my purpose, which is cash flow? And some people's purpose isn't cash flow. Some people just want the property to break even because they later want to do something with it. They just want somebody to pay for it. And so they're good with only making $50 a month. But that doesn't work for me in my strategy. Did that answer your question?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So this is related to some of those questions, actually. So another big mistake is being too optimistic with the numbers. And I actually see this a lot. The reason I didn't list it as number one, because I don't think it's the most expensive mistake, but I think it's a very common mistake. So I see new investors, they're really excited. They just feel anxious. They want to get into something. Like they've been seeing so much about real estate, and I don't know, maybe their friends invest in real estate. Maybe they've been scorned by the 2020 market. I don't know, but they're anxious. They want to get something. And so when they're calculating, it's reflected in that. And so they're playing with the numbers a little bit, trying to make things work. And it's no, don't do that. It's very hard not to do once you're in the thick of it because you're like, no, I really want this to work. But the numbers are honestly like the most important part of all of this. It's literally the core of investing. That's why it's called investing. So if you're new or seasoned or whatever, you have to make sure that you understand the numbers. And so I'm giving you here a formula that I use when I want to calculate my maximum allowable offer. So that's the most that I want to pay for a property. Now, this doesn't apply to every single type of investment. So this would apply if you are doing a BRRRR. So if you want to buy a property, rehab it, rent it out, refinance, and then repeat, this applies to that. It can also apply if you just want to buy and hold the property. You just wouldn't subtract repair costs. So the formula is you get your properly assessed ARV. ARV means after repair value. So you have to figure out what is the proper ARV. And of course, I can teach you how to do that. You get the ARV and then you multiply by 69%. So 0.69. Some people teach the 70% rule. I like the 69% rule and sometimes the 65% rule, depending on the level of risk involved in the transaction. But generally, 69% is fine. And then you subtract repair costs. Now, if you don't plan on doing any repairs on the property, then you can just ignore the repair cost piece and just do 69% of your ARV. And that'll be the most that you will be willing to pay for the property. Now, how did I get to 69%? These are just estimates underneath. So you can see I subtracted 1% to account for legal fees. That could be like the title fees, any attorney fees, 3% for holding or carrying costs. That's assuming that you're making repairs on the property, but it could also be assuming if you're not making repairs that it just takes you a while to find a renter. You're subtracting 3% for sales costs. If that applies, you might be thinking about selling the property later on, maybe in 6 months, or you might be thinking about refinancing, so you can keep that in. You subtract 20% for profit. So that's equity that you want to keep in the property for when you later want to refinance it. And then you subtract 4% for contingency or fudge factor. And that's basically just if something goes wrong. So for instance, you bought a townhouse and actually this actually happened to me. So I bought a townhouse in North Carolina and I wasn't planning on rehabbing it. I just wanted to replace a vanity in the bathroom because I felt like the vanity was really old. So that should be relatively straightforward, right? It's just a simple vanity. So I have my trusted boots on the ground, go to Lowe's in North Carolina, pick out a vanity, and she says she can install it too. I said, bet. So she takes out the old vanity, and apparently the way that the pipes are behind the wall to connect to the sink, it's like at a slant or something. And so it doesn't actually really work with the vanity that we got. And so we need a plumber to come in, but also like a handyman to cut the cabinet of the vanity to make it fit. It was a whole thing. Anyway, it cost me a bit extra money. And then on top of that, when the vanity was put in, now the backsplash wasn't fully covered. And so it was just like a patch left and it just looked a little janky. So then she had to go back to Lowe's, get some new backsplash and make it look better. But I had the funds for that because I was prepared in case something went a little off. And so that's the fudge factor piece. So these numbers or these percentages is how I came up with 69%. It may be lower if some of these don't apply, or it may be higher if your level of risk is just different. Another mistake is not shopping around. So it's honestly really exciting when you start investing in real estate. And oh wait, Lizette, is your hand still raised or is that from before? Okay, that might be from before.
Sorry, I think it's from before.
Oh, okay, cool. So you, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, it's okay. Thank you. Hi, I'm driving, so I wasn't sure how to raise my hand because I didn't want to be too unsafe.
It's
Um,
okay.
this is good. Thank you again. And I'm curious, not to like be in your personal business, but just in general, or just if you feel led to share your personal. But so when people are investing in real estate, do they just have thousands of dollars just saved to get started, or like how do you start when you feel like you don't have much of a savings? Like,
Yeah, that's a good question. So it varies per person. I can tell you the different ways that I've seen it happen, and then I'll tell you how I got started. So some people invest with another person. So I took a course in 2021, and in that course, someone created a spreadsheet because it was like half the people had the money, but maybe had a bad credit or maybe just were scared to do it alone. And then another half of the people didn't have the money, but had like excellent credit and was ready to jump in. So they created a spreadsheet and those people can meet each other. It would be like, what do you have to offer? Whatever, let's partner. So some people partner with someone else who has the thing that they don't have. That's one way to get started. Sometimes people take a bit of a riskier route to get in because they're lower on funds. And so what I mean by that is maybe they don't buy through a traditional real estate agent off the MLS. Maybe they go to an auction, like a tax deed sale, and buy the property in cash. Or maybe they buy through a land bank and then get a loan for the rehab costs. So remember that Ohio property I was talking about that I saw for sale by the land bank? So that property was listed for $2,888. And I'll never forget that number because I was shocked. So I was like, what? This is crazy. I could buy this. I have enough savings for this. I'll find $2,000 basically. So let's say I wanted to rehab that property and let's say it was good neighborhood and the numbers worked and everything. So if I use my $2,888 to buy that land bank property and then go find a lender, so that can be a private money lender or a hard money lender, and tell them, hey, this is what I want to do. These are my numbers. Can you loan me the money so that I can rehab this property? And then I'll refinance after the rehab is done, pay you your money back, and just have a mortgage, and the tenants will pay the mortgage. So some people do it that way. They acquire a cheap property and then they get a loan to rehab it, and then they refinance it to pay the loan back. Some people just save. That's what I did. So in all my boredom during the pandemic, I played a lot of money games with friends. Ooh, let's see how much we could save in these 3 months. Like competitions. I bet you can't save $5,000 over the next 3 months, kind of thing. Like it was literally those kind of games. And so in playing those games for multiple years, I saved a lot of money. And so when I was ready to pull the trigger, I think I had $50,000 saved. And I bought my second investment property through an LLC. So I was able to get a loan without it being in my personal name and just using the liquidity of my business account. And that's a whole other thing. We can talk about that another time. But that's one way. Some people, they already own a house and they just take out like a home equity line of credit. So I've also done that. So I had a condo here in California that I bought in 2017. And then in 2020, I refinanced into a home equity line of credit. And after that refinance, I received $20,000 back. And so I took that 20,000 and then I went and bought a property, my first investment property in North Carolina. And I did that with a mortgage. So my down payment and closing all in was like $18,000 and some change. So that's another way to do it. So there's various ways to get in. It just depends on your strategy, your resources. Some people just create a savings plan. Some people use money from a previous 401k and roll it over into a self-directed IRA. There's literally so many different ways that you can get started. It would just involve analyzing like your personal circumstances. So I see a
Right.
question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say thank you. And I know some people say using other people's money, like OPM. I don't really know like how that would work in this instance. Is that, do you know?
Yeah, OPM is like when you're getting a loan, or some people even borrow the down payment. So for instance, there's private money lenders. So I'm a private money lender, and that basically just means that I give out loans to investors to do their projects. So some people, like let's say they're a wholesaler. A wholesaler is basically a person who is the middleman between a buyer and seller, and then they put their fee on top of that and they take a little bit of cash. So sometimes wholesalers need maybe $2,000 to $5,000 and they don't want to use their own 2,000 to 5,000. So they'll borrow from me. They only need it for a few weeks. And then once the deal closes, then they pay me back. I heard on a podcast recently, someone used a private money lender to literally buy the whole property. And then she got a loan from a hard money lender to get the rehab loan to repair the property. So she used only like 10%. I think it was 10% down of her own money. And she was partnered with two other people. So it was three of them. So they use other people's money and then a little bit of their own money. So I think that's what people mean when they're saying use other people's money. Like just don't put all your money in. So some people are anti-cash. They're like, why buy this property for 100,000 with all your cash when you could just put down 10% and preserve your cash and borrow the rest from someone else? So I think that's what they mean. Lizette, you have a question?
I forget the terms that you use, but you were talking about when you refinance your condo, how long generally do you have to wait to be able to do that?
It's usually 6 months. Usually the lenders like to see that you've owned your property for 6 months before you're trying to refinance. So I had owned the property for well over 6 months, and that was actually my second refinance. My first refinance was in 2019, and that was just me refinancing into a new mortgage. And then in 2020, I turned around and refinanced into a HELOC because it was just a better product for me. So you can refinance as many times as you want, as long as you find a company that will do it for you. But usually it's about 6 months.
But when you refinanced and got the money to reinvest elsewhere, is that because you had paid like enough had been paid into the mortgage, into the loan, or is can it happen at the 6 month mark?
So it was both. So I bought my condo in 2017 for 360,000. And so by the time 2019 had come, I had a little bit of equity because I had been making my payments on time, but also the value of my property had increased by then. So when the new company, the new mortgage company came out and did an appraisal, the property was worth more than 360,000 and I had a little bit of equity. So maybe I only owed 340,000 or something like that. I think it was less than that. So now the property appraises for I don't remember, it was 400 something. And what I owe is even lower. So now they're able to lend to me up to a certain amount, and then I can take the cash for the difference. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you.
Simone?
I have another question if there's time.
Yeah, there's time.
Okay, thank you. So what about, okay, I guess it's two questions. So you're an expert at this. You have a lot of experience. So what about when people, I guess, get upside down or you're refinancing and the price, the value of the home is going up, right? So it's working in your favor. How do you prevent it not working out in your favor? And then two, I hear some people that are homeowners, they end up having issues with their tenants not paying. And I guess in some states, especially California, there's so many things that are preventing tenants from not paying. So how do you prevent having to deal with that stress?
Yeah, so I have been in a situation where my property did not appraise for what I needed it to appraise for. So this situation though was not totally preventable. I went in with a good purchase price. You can always try to get a lower purchase price. That's always the ideal scenario. I bought this duplex. My numbers were good, my rehab budget was good, and the market was in my favor when I bought it. So I was looking at an ARV or after repair value of 330,000 and I had purchased it for 165,000 and my rehab budget was like 62,000, but I budgeted 82,000 just in case. So it should have worked out, but there's some other things that I did that did not work in my favor that could have prevented some of the financial issues, but it couldn't have prevented the fact that the market shifted. So my rehab took longer than I wanted it to take, and that's because the contractor ended up walking off the job. So there's definitely things I could have done to prevent that, which would have made the rehab happen faster. So when he walked off the job, that cost me 35,000 additional dollars and then extended my timeline, right? So now because my timeline was extended, I'm in a position where the market has shifted. What the ARV would have been, because all housing prices have dropped at that time, no appraiser would appraise my property for 330,000, even though that's what it appraised for when I bought it. So I got, I think, four more appraisals or something like that, and none of them were coming in where I needed them to come in, which was a problem because I needed to repay my hard money loan, and it was only a loan for a year. So that situation ended up working out because of a personal contact. And that's another story for another day, but it ended up working out. But one thing you can do to prevent that is making sure you don't buy too high, making sure your numbers are solid. If your numbers are solid, that's honestly one of the best things you can do to make sure that you're not upside down. Another thing you can do is to be by the book. These contractors will try to be all friendly with you and stuff, or maybe you might trust someone because they were referred to you by someone you do trust. And so you do less formal things like require them to sign a formal contract or be very clear with the payment schedule and things like that. Like those things can fall by the wayside when you're in the middle of it and it's your first time and emotions are high. Like, but making sure that you stick and be by the book, you know, getting a surety bond and asking for their certificate of insurance and making them sign a contract, like I could have prevented losing $35,000 if I had done those things. And then maybe my project would have finished sooner and maybe I wouldn't have been getting the appraisal at the time that I did. And maybe it would have been okay. Who knows? There's really no way to predict that. But I would say like being by the book and buying at the right price and keeping your numbers right are the best way to prevent those types of things. And then I think oh wait, you had another question, but I'm gonna come back to you because I know Simone had her hand up.
I had two questions, and hopefully I can make them quick and not too long. So the first one, I wanted to know if you've heard of websites like Roofstock, and have you heard of that?
No, I don't know what that is.
So it's a website. I guess I can follow up with you offline and then like we could talk about it. But it's basically pretty much it does a lot of the research of like the neighborhood, what schools are nearby, what the cash flow would be percentage wise. But I just wanted to get your opinion about what you thought about that. But I could follow up whenever you have a chance to look at it. And then my second question was, so if your first property is an investment property and in situations where you're looking for cash flow, of course in California the market's really expensive, so there's not a lot, I feel like there's not a lot of opportunities for cash flow. Would you say doing an investment property out of state would hinder you being able to benefit from getting like a traditional loan? Because I know there's a lot of programs that will help you with down payment assistance. But if you go with an investment property out of state first, how will that hinder you when you're looking for your primary residence?
It depends on how you buy the property. So if you buy the property out of state for investment purposes in an entity such as an LLC or a corporation, it really shouldn't impact anything for your primary residence. If you buy it in your personal name, you'll have to put more down, but it shouldn't impact your ability to get something like an FHA loan, other than the fact that your debt to income ratio will change. So if you pay 20% down for a property in New York, and then you turn around 6 months later and you want to buy a primary residence in LA, you should still be able to put 3.5% because you don't currently have an FHA loan. Now, if they say, hey, here's a first-time homebuyers program, you most likely won't qualify that for that because you're not a first-time home buyer. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that does.
Okay. And then Dawn, sorry, I forgot your other question.
Oh, it's okay. I was asking just in regards to tenants. I
Oh, yeah.
have some friend. Yeah. Oh,
Okay. The tenants. Yeah. So I think the best way to handle the possibility of tenants not paying is to retain a certain amount of reserves when you're collecting rent every month. So when you work the numbers, you'll have to factor in, okay, I want to put aside this amount just in case there's a repair or a tenant doesn't pay. But another way to prevent that is just, I've had a situation where I had to evict a tenant, and she was actually a really good tenant on paper. She made a lot of money. She just stopped paying. I have no idea why. She stopped communicating. So I couldn't even work something out with her. And it's honestly just unpreventable. It's just a part of the business. And it's just something that you want to be ready for. That being said, I would never advise you to buy a property that you cannot pay the mortgage for if a tenant is not there. If covering that mortgage for 3 months is going to just wipe you out, I don't think you should buy that property because you just never know what might happen. It could be that a tenant passes away and now it takes time to get their stuff out so they settle their estate, and for you to find a new tenant, you just don't know, and you might have to cover those expenses in that time period. Or it could be that something, God forbid, like a pipe bursts at the property and you have to relocate the tenant, and then you still have to cover the mortgage. So I would make sure that your numbers are tight in case those things come up, because honestly, they almost always come up. The more property you get, the more likely it is that at some point somebody gonna have to get evicted or somebody ain't gonna pay rent on time. Like it's just,
right. And
that's
then you have
just,
the transition phase, right? People move out. They may not move
yes.
in right away. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was just wondering because I know that maybe it was only during COVID, but I think even there was some protections where people didn't have to pay for a long time. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's still going on, but it seems like the people that I know are still dealing with people that have back rent for years. And then I guess it just got forgiven, or I don't know. I've been paying my rent, so I don't know.
I cannot imagine, and I'm so thankful that I didn't have to deal with any of that during COVID. But honestly, I've heard of squatter hunters and things like that. Different states have different protections. It's unlikely that you're going to have a squatter in Texas, but it's very likely in California. And a lot of that is just state laws. And that's part of the reason why, like, as an attorney, I talk about the risk of investing in certain states. Like, to me, whether a state is landlord or tenant friendly matters. And it definitely affects what strategy I use. So, like in California, I'm not really into the rent out the whole place strategy. Like in California, I rent out each room because there's nothing more awkward than sharing a room with somebody when you ain't paid your rent and you really ain't supposed to be there. Like it's gonna be hard to lock yourself in the room when you're sharing a space with other people. That's how I see it. But it hasn't happened to me. And I think it's honestly just something you can't really plan for. Like you can't plan for every single thing. The best thing to do is just make sure that you're in the best financial position possible, that you have done the most due diligence as you can, that you have the proper insurance, that you take the proper legal route, everything that you can do. The rest is just out of your control. And then I'm gonna just finish these two up, and then I see there's more questions, but I'm just gonna get through this and then we can continue the questions. So one of the other big mistakes I see is not shopping around. So people get excited and they hire the first agent they talk to, or maybe they are good with the agent, but because the agent referred this contractor, they go with that person. Like I've made that mistake. Don't do it. Make sure you get at least 3 quotes. I heard someone who got 12 quotes from general contractors before she decided to hire someone. That's the next level. And one day that might be me, but generally at least three, because you're always going to get different numbers. And then we already talked about interviewing multiple agents. Don't just hire the first agent you talk to. They all talk a good game. And it's not to say anything bad about agents, but Like I've asked agents, are you investor friendly? And they're like, oh, yes, definitely. Only to find out that they don't know nothing about real estate investing. They don't own any investments. They never worked with an investor. And I'm just like, they just wanted to get the sale. So just make sure you talk to multiple people and always do a gut check and a vibe check. Another big mistake is performing lackluster due diligence. And so due diligence is the phase where you're buying a property where you can investigate the property. This is where you do your home inspections, where you have some contractors come out and tell you what the cost of certain repairs are going to be, where you're grilling the HOA to figure out, do they have the finances to keep up with this property? And that's one thing I'm very passionate about, making sure the HOA can pay for the things it's supposed to pay for. And that might be personal trauma, but it's okay. Now, this is the phase where you really need to go all in, ask as many questions as you can, even if you feel like you're being annoying, it doesn't matter. This is where you're going to find out the real information that you need to know about this property. And it's going to help you leverage maybe your inspection report or whatever information you find to get a better deal. I would say on pretty much all of my purchases, except for the ones where I skipped the due diligence phase, and that's not something I would recommend that you do as a new investor. But all the due diligence phases that I've been through, I've been able to negotiate money off of the purchase price or something towards closing because I'm trying to find stuff. I'm trying to figure out after we close, what are you hiding? And after we close, I don't want it to come out. I want it to come out now, and I want you to pay for it instead of me having to pay for it. So this, I see people slacking on. They're like, oh, do I need an inspection? Do I want to have a contractor come out? I don't know. Yes, okay, I'm good with a 7-day due diligence. No, just cancel all that. If this is in your first 1 through 3 investments, you need to go all in on the due diligence until you learn more about this industry and about construction. All right. Questions. Let's see. I can't see people's hands anymore. Oh, wait, Charlissa, you have a question?
Yes. So when you acquire a multifamily like unit, how do you go about creating your pro forma? Because I know it's projected like rents and things like that. How do you go about that?
Yeah, so I run all my numbers before I even make an offer. So a lot of it will depend on what you're trying to get out of it. So if I'm buying a multifamily, I'm trying to cash flow a certain amount. So I'm going in, I'm looking at, all right, how much can I get for rent for each unit? How much can I get from Section 8 versus how much can I get from market? I'm looking at what are all my controllable expenses? Will I be able to put anything aside? Will I be able, is this a cash purchase or is it a mortgage? And all those numbers will come into play. All the financial details that matter should happen before you even make an offer. I don't use like special formulas in terms of creating a pro forma document. I just have a notebook or an Excel sheet where I run my numbers. Different investors do different things. I think pro formas are more applicable to like syndications or maybe more bigger multi-unit properties, like if you have 20 units or something. But if it's just like 2 to 4 units, I just run the numbers by looking at, what I can get for each. And that'll just depend on how much you're willing to tolerate in terms of loss, if any. Just depends on your personal risk level. I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
Simone?
So when you were talking about inspections, like if your first investment property is out of state, would you recommend to ensure that you can be there for the inspection or just rely on the team, even if you just built a relationship with them and you trust them, but you haven't been to the property yet?
I all my first out of state properties I bought without being there.
Okay.
If you got money like that and time like that and you could just fly back and forth, go for it by all means. I did not have that luxury, and it would have really messed with my numbers to be taking flights to all these different places. Some of my agents, like my Chicago agent, every time she walks the property for me, she goes live on Instagram so that later I can go back and look at the link and it's always there for me. So she would go live on Instagram, ask questions, whatever, get videos, and then she would send me pictures as well. My North Carolina agent, her inspector is really good. He also lets you call him after the fact and ask questions about the report. If something's unclear, he'll explain it to you. I don't think you need to be there for the home inspection if you have a good inspector, but also I don't always recommend that someone get an inspection. Like an inspection is not always necessary. So for example, I bought a property in Ohio and it was a cash purchase. I could have got a home inspector, but I already knew the property was trash. There's no point in me getting a home inspector. What I needed to do was have a general contractor go out and give me a quote for all the things that I knew needed to be done. Because when the realtor first walked it, I already knew the property was trash. Like, I don't need an inspector to tell me that. So sometimes it's really not worth it, depending on what your strategy is. But that's a property that I'm flipping. I don't need to have an inspector for that. I need a contractor. If it's a property that I want and it's supposed to be turnkey, like if I'm not expecting to make any repairs, yes, I want a home inspector to go out and inspect that property for me. And I don't need to be there.
Thank you.
Mhm. I see Lizette has her hand raised.
I was just wondering, when you're talking about the land bank properties, do they tend to be in less desirable or like developing areas, or are there properties like all over?
I have only looked at a few land banks, and to be honest, like they were in states that I'm not from. So I don't know if the area is less desirable. I know that in talking to some of the agents there, they might say, I wouldn't live here. But that doesn't necessarily tell me that it's desirable or not desirable. I think my philosophy is like everyone needs somewhere to live, even if it's not somewhere we would live. So if there's people living there, to me, it's rent worthy.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So we're pretty much at the end. This is just a picture of the new you after you have all the information you need, when you're confident investing out of state because you're going to follow the strategies that we talked about and not make the mistakes that we talked about. This is just me encouraging you. I think one thing that didn't click for me because I didn't see a lot of women doing this kind of work was that, oh, if that person's doing it, I can do it. And I think that's maybe what took me so long because I wanted to invest for a year before I actually did anything. So I just want you to know that you can actually do this. There might be challenges, it might be hard, but you can do hard things. Like you're smart, you're intelligent, you have resources. So don't forget that. This is the code again, if anyone needs it. And then I just want to say thank you all for being here and thank you for listening.